This is Brent Bozell with the Media Research Center. It is a real pleasure to have with us a man who I believe is the #1 strategist / analyst in America today. For those of you who remember E.F. Hutton commercials, he is the E.F. Hutton of politics today. When he says something, you just stop and you listen and accept it. And I mean this, I've known you for many, many years. And you don't need to take surveys. You don't need to do focus groups. Just go on Fox and wait until he's a guest and he's asked about whatever issue is important to you. And I absolutely warrant you, you'll have the answer you need. Okay, with that as a startup, Newt, let me ask you the first question that everybody has on his mind. How are the elections going?
Well, look, I spent all of 2016 saying that Donald Trump would win. And I remember 2 weeks before the election, I did an event on Fox with Megyn Kelly. And she said, well, Hillary's clearly ahead. And I said, well, Trump will win. And she said, well, what about the polls in Pennsylvania? And I said, look, in your universe, Hillary's carrying Pennsylvania. In my universe, Trump is. And we went through Wisconsin and Michigan on exactly the same pattern. She got totally frustrated. So I'm saying the same thing. For the first time since 1972, Minnesota's in play, and I think has a very high likelihood of going for Trump. Wisconsin, after what's happened in Kenosha, my wife's from Wisconsin, my son-in-law's from Wisconsin. I'm reasonably confident Trump's going to carry Wisconsin. There's a new poll out in Georgia. Trump's now up 6 in Georgia. So I think there are all sorts of patterns building. I also think politics is dynamic in the sense that success begets success and failure begets failure. And you have on the Democratic side a ticket which is, by any reasonable standard, so weak. It's clearly the weakest ticket since George McGovern in 1972. Biden can't function. I tell people, close your eyes and imagine that an American president is negotiating with General Secretary Xi Jinping, who is the very tough dictator of Communist China. Do you want a guy who is tough but a little rough around the edges? Or do you want a guy who's pleasant and falls asleep halfway through the meeting? I mean, the idea of Biden in the real world having any capacity to be president is just crazy. It's clear that he couldn't do the job. Kamala Harris is a terrible candidate, the worst vice presidential candidate in modern times. She went from 15% support to 4% before she dropped out. She was running 4th in the black community. Biden had 8 times as many black supporters as she did. I can't figure out, other than money from Silicon Valley and Hollywood, I can't figure out why they'd pick her. So I'm about to do just one last thing. I'm about to do a podcast at Gingrich 360, which is free, and it's going to be Kamala Harris in her own words. And I've just gone back and collected like 25 or 30 truly goofy, radical, or stupid things that she said. And I'm just going to put them all together and let people say, don't take my word for it, listen to her.
Okay, you have spent 40 years or more in the political space. I have. I've never seen what we're witnessing now with the Democratic Party. Maybe you'll correct me on it. I've never seen the degree to which that party is lying. Not that it's misstating, not that it's exaggerating. Look, politicians do that all the time. It's not spinning. I'm talking about outright lying on important things. What kind of lies? They're lying, saying that the president is responsible for the violence in their cities that they control. They are blaming him for a bad response to COVID when he was at this before it was a big thing. They're blaming him for the fact that you have to have mail-in voting because of those COVID things. And mail-in voting is an absolute requirement. They are now accusing him of stealing the elections while all that stuff is going on that they're doing. And I'm simply amazed by this. I'm amazed they will say anything. Tell me, Newt, in your career, quite honestly, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I think this particular, I've seen parallel things in terms of the violence and et cetera. But I think what you've seen now is something which Theodore White commented on in his 1972 Making of the President, when he was trying to explain the rise of McGovern. And he said, the liberal ideology had become a liberal theology. And you either obeyed 100% or you were a bad person. And he really described in some serious ways what was happening with the news media, so that in a sense, the 72 collision was a forerunner of what we're living through. You have a propaganda media which has no relationship to the news. News media except maybe for the Wall Street Journal and Fox News, news media is basically just disintegrated and become replaced by the pathological requirements of the propaganda machine of the left. You have a rabid totalitarian ideology on the campuses, which believe that they have the right to crush you if you dissent. A wonderful book by Murray called The Madness of Crowds, which really captures a lot of that. You have basically Saul Alinsky finally has conquered the Democratic Party. And if you read Alinsky's rules for radicals, this makes perfect sense. Since we are evil bourgeois establishmentarian supporters of a slavocracy dominated by white male supremacists, lying to us is in fact your duty. Why would you worry about the truth? And I think that's where they come from. They think it's a moral good to lie. In that sense, they resemble the Nazis and the communists. I think Lenin would be proud of them. Mao would understand them pretty well. And I think that we have to recognize this is essentially a neo-fascist movement disguised as a Democratic Party. And it's split into three groups. The really rabid, AOC is a good example. Bernie Sanders is a good example. The enthusiastic fellow travelers, I would say that Schumer and Pelosi sort of fit in that. And then the intimidated. The pro-life Democrats were told, for example, they could not have a caucus at the Democratic Convention, period. And so what you're seeing, I think, is I don't know if you saw it, but I watched Mayor Wheeler in Portland at his press conference Sunday. The guy's a loon. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's presided over 94 straight days of violence, and his answer is to beg people to quit being violent. And from that, I wrote a paper, my newsletter, that the Democrats have become the Lion King party, in that they can't cope with evil, they can't cope with aggression, they can't cope with predators, either at home or abroad, because they think the Lion King is a documentary, and they think that warthogs and zebras and lions actually sing and dance together. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to Wheeler, I mean, and you realize, or you listen to de Blasio, who's the worst mayor in America, this is why all the Democratic big cities are collapsing. They have been taken over by left-wing radicals, and therefore, as a left-wing radical, you have no obligation to be honest. Yeah. Anyway, that's sort of my analysis.
Well, the only thing you can do is blame Trump, and that mayor in his press conference, I believe, was blamed this all on Trump, which is stunning when the president is offering to help and is being rejected, and then they blame him. Okay, where this dishonesty is concerned, it leads to the next question that I have with social media. If you study Dr. Robert Epstein, who is an expert in these things, and one needs to always underscore, he's not a Republican, he's a Democrat, who did a study showing that Google, through manipulation of its algorithms, was able to move 3 million votes over to from the Trump column over to the Clinton column. And he said that the algorithms now are set up where they're going to be able to move at least 15 million votes over to to Biden. I mean, that's a dramatic thing. I also know, but I'm not at liberty to say, that there's another study that's going to come out that's going to be even more devastating. You've got Silicon Valley just shamelessly coming to Washington and arguing that it's a neutral platform, but then these are the biggest corporations in the world, and they keep getting caught over and over and over. I mean, we just finished a study, I think you're in it, that showed that at least 260 times that people who have criticized Biden have been censored. 260 times. There's anything like this that I've ever seen. What do you see about the power of them? Jean Kirkpatrick once gave this great ad-lib talk at one of our conferences, where she talked about entities in the American space that have worked outside the system of checks and balances with the power of the other three branches. And she suggested the media were in that camp. I would suggest social media is now in that camp. What's your view of all this?
Well, I think we will, I hope next year, have very serious hearings on this whole model, because the fact is Silicon Valley has become a self-selecting left-wing machine in which you can't survive unless you're part of the true faith. And therefore, since it's true faith, when they correct the rest of us, they're simply doing what faith requires. It's a little bit like the Inquisition in Spain. And I think people won't tolerate that. The long-run history of America has been that if you get big enough, the country trims you down to size. Whether you're Standard Oil or you're the railroads, you go down the list of IBM, AT&T, and I suspect as people learn more about the degree of really malevolence, I mean, these are very left-wing people. Ironically, by the way, the values they claim they care about don't show up at all in Silicon Valley. Black Lives Matter, they don't matter enough to hire them. And so if you were to look at who actually works for these big systems, they are overwhelmingly Asian. They are second white, third some Latinos, but not many, and almost no African Americans. And so one of the ways they try to protect themselves is by pretending that they are part of the left, so that nobody will look very carefully at them. But I think they're now so big, and it's beginning to be obvious, you know, when they can cut off Breitbart, for example, there's something so profoundly wrong with that level of power being wielded in secret that I just think we will find ways to get them under control or to break them up, whatever it takes.
Let me ask you a question about the American public. Black Lives Matter. The leaders of it, not you, not I, the leaders of Black Lives Matter declare themselves to be trained Marxists. And to me, it's not Marxist that bothers me, it's trained. Why are they saying they're trained? Trained by whom? Trained for what? We don't know. Then you read their manifesto. It's very short and crisp, and it's in black and white. It is overwhelmingly having to do with gay issues, not with civil rights issues for African Americans. And it ends with a call to destroy the family. And it's right there in a crisp little document, 80% approval for Black Lives Matter. What, Newt, does it say about the public that they would support Black Lives Matter but don't bother to find out what they are?
I think that's normal. I mean, what you had was, and this is why I like Murray's book on the madness of crowds. You had a wave of hysteria. You had the news media giving people an extraordinarily shallow, one-sided view of things. You had athletes like the National Basketball Association decide they would wear Black Lives Matter shirts. And so people thought, yeah, I guess I'm from, yeah, Black lives do matter. Well, you've seen, for example, in Wisconsin, a 26-point drop in approval in less than a month. Because as people began to watch what's going on, they began to say, wait a second, I thought there were these goody-goodies over here trying to end racism, but if in fact they are looters and they're disruptors and they're actually trying to impose a Marxist solution, then I'm against them. And they literally have dropped now to about parity. It's about 48-46, approve, disapprove, and they'll keep going down further. But it is very ironic that the people who founded it originally, it's a brilliant, again, much in the Saul Alinsky tradition, it's a brilliant invention, gave them tremendous cover for a while. They've raised huge amounts of money out of people like the Ford Foundation, which I predict will be one of the next things we look at. I mean, the degree to which the left has captured all of these great foundations and uses them to fund anti-American activities is just astonishing.
I really like the fact that the vice president yesterday was calling for an investigation to find out who is running Black Lives Matter. It just isn't a grassroots, homegrown thing. This is very coordinated, very organized. People are being moved from one location to the other, but nobody knows how exactly it's being done. I'm glad he's doing it. Let me turn to this. You have written yet another book. I don't know how many. You got to tell me how many books you've written. Not to mention essays. And you were the first person, I believe, you were the first person to use the technology to do online lectures, breaking your lectures into pieces, which was brilliant. Your new book, Trump and the American Future. Tell us what it is.
Well, I decided late last year that this would be the most important election since Lincoln's reelection in 1864. Lincoln had an opponent who, if he'd won, would have allowed the South to secede, destroyed the United States, and tolerated the survival of slavery. So the gap in those two platforms was unbelievable. I think we're in a similar situation. And I think Biden and Harris and Pelosi and Schumer represent a power structure which would create a radically different America. And so I wanted to write a book that would arm Trump supporters with the facts and the arguments, and some of it has turned out to be almost eerily prophetic. We finished the book in March. We have a chapter in there on the Democrats favoring criminals and opposing police. You read that chapter and then you look at this morning's headlines. It's eerie how accurate it is. We talked about the radical 200 in the House, and since we wrote the book, Pelosi got 207 Democrats to vote for H.R. 6800, which, among other things, releases 6 serial killers and provides a $1,200 bonus check to every illegal immigrant as a bonus for having illegally gotten into the U.S. I mean, so there are lots of the book that when you get into an argument, you'll be able to go to the book and have the case for reality, and it's very factually based, and people, I think, can take that book comfortably to any gathering and can use it as a workbook to help win the election. So that was the real theory behind that, is that we wanted to help people at a time when you're not going to get it out of the New York Times or the Washington Post or NBC News. So we wanted to give you something to turn to. It's done very well. It's been a New York Times bestseller and continues to sell. And I think people do find it helpful, and they tell their friends about it.
Well, I will say to the folks that are watching this now, Trump and the American Future, buy it. I confess I didn't have it. I promise I'll put it at the top of my list now that you've done it. Okay, let me ask you some questions that have been asked. Mike asks, since in California, basically a driver's license is voter registration, how can they ensure ballots for federal office are not coming from illegal aliens? What's your thought?
They can't. Same thing's true in New York. If you give every illegal alien a driver's license, and then you tie the driver's license to the right to vote, and then you send out automatic ballots, so you don't even have to ask for it. So I'm sitting here. I know I'm here illegally, but I just got a ballot in the mail so I assume they must want me to vote. That's why the whole vote harvesting thing in California. The warnings over the last week, which are fascinating to watch, where these Democratic groups are saying Trump will win in a landslide on election night, but over the next 3 or 4 days, as we count all the mail ballots, his majority will disappear. I mean, I've never heard a more confident explanation of stealing an election than the Democrats have recently started saying.
So let's say that on election night nothing's settled, and I think more and more people are coming to that conclusion. And then it's a battle of the lawyers. It's Florida times 50.
Right.
What happens constitutionally? There's a lot of confusion on that. What happens if it isn't resolved by January 20th of 2020?
Presumably, at that point, the Speaker of the House would take over, or if the Electoral College cannot reach a majority, it goes to the House, and each state then has one vote, which is interesting if you're a liberal Democrat, because it means Wyoming matches California. So it's not necessarily to the advantage of the left to actually get it into the House.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying, because we carry Montana, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming, you name it. And all of a sudden, you have an entire block of Republican votes, and they're getting one vote for New York and one vote for California.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. I hope that most of the theft is coming from deep blue states, California, New York. It's not going to help anything.
But the danger there is it could cost you control of the House.
Yeah. Good point. Let me ask you this. 2008, you ran for president. It was a lot of fun for someone like me or the Media Research Center, because you were the first. You're well before the president. You were the first to go after the media, and I think it won you Georgia or something. If I was talking to President Newt Gingrich, I would ask him, Mr. President, what are you going to do about the disintegration in the cities and mob rule in some cities in America? What would President Newt Gingrich be doing?
Well, I don't want to talk about President Newt Gingrich, but I would just say my advice to the current president would be, one, establish clearly that the right to safety is a constitutional right, and that therefore the federal government will prosecute in any jurisdiction in which it feels that the local government is failing to prosecute. So any of the George Soros elected district attorneys who refuse to prosecute will be inviting the U.S. attorney to take over their job, in effect. We have absolute precedent for this. In Osage County in 1925, the Osage Indians were being killed for their oil rights, and the local sheriff was part of the gang. They appealed to the federal government, and the first major Federal Bureau of Investigation case was going in to protect Osage Indians. It was a very successful case, and it made J. Edgar Hoover's reputation. In 1930, the city of Chicago was so corrupt that Elliot Ness was sent in to get Al Capone as a federal agent, having to take on a city police force and a city government that were both corrupted by Capone. In the 1960s, when Mississippi local law enforcement would not protect young volunteers who had come in for civil rights, the FBI went in. And there's a brilliant movie called Mississippi Burning, which gives you a flavor of what that was like. So we have ample precedent for the federal government moving in and protecting Americans. And I think, frankly, I think we need to get through the election before this reaches a crisis. But I think the president, if he gets reelected, should force the crisis, including cutting off federal funds to cities in which the mayor and the city council refuse to do their first job. The first job, a pretty famous liberal wrote last week that he now is going to vote for Trump because he said, I disagree with him on everything except safety. But if in fact I can't be safe, there isn't anything else that matters. And I think the president would be fully within his rights to say, cities which are systemically avoiding protecting their own residents, one, will have federal officials doing it, and two, will simply cut off all federal funding.
Yeah, I was at the White House. I think you might have been also for the announcement. For Trump's acceptance speech the other day, and it was just stunning that you had to leave from a different side of the grounds of the White House to avoid a mob that was attacking you and attacked Rand Paul and others. It's just stunning that in the people's house you can't leave without being attacked. I personally believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I personally believe that the president's political numbers would skyrocket if he took that action, because America's fed up with this disintegration.
Yep.
And I think it says something about this president that my guess is he knows that. And he's still reluctant to do it. That's one thing I really like about this president, where he's being terribly underestimated. Colleen asks, is there any chance of getting rid of Pelosi? In other words, is there any chance Republicans could take the House?
I think the odds are probably even money that McCarthy will be the next speaker. I think
Really?
that well, you have 207 Democrats who voted for a bill which was insane. And I think the key is for the Republicans in those districts to make clear how crazy the bill is. It's truly, I've done like 6 or 8 podcasts about HR 6800. You also have the fact that all of this violence undermines Democrats in general. And so if Biden and Harris collapse, which I think they will, the odds are very good that that collapse will lead to a really deep disintegration of the Democratic vote, people to stay home, and will lead to independents overwhelmingly siding with Republicans. And potentially, if the safety issue gets to be big enough, you could, and then the economy issue gets to be big enough, you could see weak Democrats voting for Trump. So, I mean, that's how you get the sort of 1972, 1984 landslide, is when all of a sudden people look up and go, I just can't do it. I mean, I worked with the Bush campaign in '88 when they were down 19 points in May, and we beat Dukakis by 6 in November. So we switched 1 out of every 4 Americans.
Well,
and we did it with information.
And so how does that translate to the Senate?
I think we probably end up at least +2. We're going to pick up Arizona. I mean, we're going to pick up Alabama. I think as I look around, there are a couple of states that were in really tough dogfights, but I think there's a very real likelihood we're going to pick up Michigan, and I think people should be watching New Mexico, where we have a superb candidate for an open seat against one of those Democrats in the House who voted for all of these goofy things in HR 6800. So, and fracking is a huge issue in New Mexico, where Biden and Harris are just totally on the wrong side. So I wouldn't be shocked to see us come out of the election either holding our own or gaining 1 or 2 in the Senate.
In 1991, I think it was, when the Sandinistas allowed an election in Nicaragua, I was down there. At the end of the campaign, we held a press conference, we being ACU, a couple of other organizations, I guess the Organization of American States, the Carter Center, people that have been monitoring the elections. And we were asked to give our predictions. Everyone predicted that the Sandinistas were going to win because in the last poll they'd been up 20-some points. I predicted that the opposition party was going to win for the reason that, and I gave all the credit to the columnist Ben Wattenberg, who we knew, who had written a column in the Washington Times that sold me completely, where he said this is not an election, this is a referendum. The question is not who do you want for president, the question is do you want to starve? And the pollster is a Sandinista. What do you think you're going to tell the pollster? Which sold me completely. And that's exactly what happened. She won by 4 points. I see a parallel in the votes today. Talk about the polling and how you see the accuracy or inaccuracy of polls today. What should people think about polling?
Well, people should be extraordinarily skeptical about polling. Truman was 13 points behind in September and he won. As I said a little while ago, Bush was 19 points behind in May and he won. Campaigns are very dynamic, and if you get the right breaks, you can move a tremendous number of people very fast. Second, when you have the kind of unending 5-year media hostility, you suppress votes in terms of what people will tell you. The polling firm that's done the best job of measuring this is Trafalgar, and Trafalgar really has they had the best record in 2016, They had the best record in 2018. They believe that the hidden Trump vote is probably around 7 points. So whatever Trump is currently getting, he adds 7. And they believe that Trump is almost certainly going to get reelected. And that's before you have these issue effects that I'm talking about. I mean, Trump has a consolidated base that is pretty close to half the country. And these are people who, I just talked to friends, for example, in Minnesota, who were describing entire parts of the state where you see nothing but Trump signs. Callista and I had this experience in 16. The last weekend before the election, we went to see her sister-in-law, who lives in Stevens Point, which is the center of Wisconsin. And so we drove for about 2 hours on rural roads and realized afterwards we had seen several hundred Trump signs and several hundred Ron Johnson for Senate signs. And we had seen no signs for Hillary.
Really?
No signs for Feingold, the Democratic Senate candidate. And I actually called Reince Priebus, who was National Committee Chairman and who was from Wisconsin. And I said, I have to say we're probably going to carry the state. And he said, frankly, that's what our internal polling shows. So my hunch is you have two things. One is you have an undercounting, and you also have polls that are just stupid. I mean, when somebody shows you all Americans, it has no meaning for the election because all Americans aren't going to vote. And one of the things you've got to watch is, let's say that I'm a soft Biden supporter, and you call me, and this is why they're so desperate to have vote by mail. And you call me and you say, who am I for? And I say, well, I'm for Biden. But does that measure whether or not I'll turn out? Because everywhere this year that we've had turnout, Republicans have been extraordinarily strong. Picked up a seat in California for the first time in 20 years, won 2 specials in New York State. I just talked to a state legislator in a county right around New York City, but a suburban county. He said Trump is up 21 in reaction to the violence in New York. And this is a county that Hillary carried. So I think there are a lot of things underway right now. Every time the coronavirus gets better, Trump gets stronger. Every time the economy gets a little better, Trump gets stronger. And Biden can't campaign. I mean, you know, in the entire period since he gave his acceptance speech, he's done 1 campaign event in Pittsburgh. Now, one of the reasons Trump beat Hillary is he was doing 5 or 6 rallies a day, and she was doing 1 event in the evening. And just sheer energy, sheer mobilization makes a huge difference.
Look, we're going to wrap it up. I said before we began, I said to Newt, conversation could go on for hours, and it really could go for hours. But we're going to wrap it up with one last point that I'm going to make. Later on this month, the Media Research Center is going to launch and announce a very big initiative to take on the social media giants and their censorship campaign. As I put this together, I wanted to have an advisory board. And a lot of advisory boards, let's face it, they're names on a letterhead to make the organization look good. Nobody reads letters anymore, so that doesn't help. I really wanted an advisory board, a board that will advise us going forward. And I've got to say, the very first person I wanted was Newt Gingrich, and he accepted right away. So Newt will be on the advisory board, and it's going to be a huge help to what we do. Thank you, Newt. You're one of my heroes. You proved in this conversation that I was right at the outset when I said you're the top strategist and analyst in America. So thank you again. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.
Great to be with you.